Okay. Hello, Brigitte.
Hi.
Hey, how
Hi.
are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing great. Hey, I don't know if they told you, we always do this whenever we have a great guest on, especially a person in your stature. We do what is called the over the top intro. This is a way we're big on this, giving people their flowers, especially when they're sitting right in front of us. We get a chance to gush all over you for a second. Is that okay if I do that before we get this interview started?
I could use that today. Thank you very much.
All right, well, let's get it started. My next guest hails from Copenhagen, Denmark. She is an award-winning director, writer, and producer. You may know her from her work on The Spanish Princess, Small Avid, Small Avalanches. Now look at me, and my eagle-eyed people may have seen her in the award-winning film Philadelphia. And what we are here to talk about today, Afterwar. It will be making its debut, the North American premiere at Doc NYC in the Kaleidoscope competition section this Saturday, November 16th at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time at the Village East. Birgitte Stærmose, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much. That was great. You
I
saved my
gotta
day.
I gotta start off big. I gotta start off big. I want you to smile because we're about to talk about something that it's not a lot of smiling. Just want to put it
Yeah.
like that. It just. I watched this film Afterwar, and this was something because watching these four kids go through hell, hell on earth, and then having to live after that. I was That was a tough watch, but I watched it. I'm curious, how did this film come about? How did this idea show up?
I mean, it came about in, over a long period of time. It's something that I've worked on over a period of time of 15 years. What happened was that I did a short film with them in 2008. There was a short film with them when they were children. The experience of doing that film was very big for me and for the crew. Partly meeting them made a big impression on us. The way we made the film, there were just many aspects where it was a feeling of discovery and revelation and intimacy with them, and sort of an unforgettable experience for all of us. And so it's something that, we talk about. I was keeping in touch with some of the kids over the years. I was following others on social media. And after 8 years, I decided to see if they wanted to do another film with me. And I partly did that because I was curious about trying to tell a story that happened, about the struggle that they had over a longer period of time, because I think it's something we have trouble telling about. That when people, if people in this case grow up after the war, or they also have grown up in great poverty, it's very difficult to change that course in their lives. And I really wanted to try and tell about that. That's just how, when you have this struggle, that it's not, I think we're guilty in the movie industry of telling stories about how people always somehow find a way, right? And the fact is that if you grow up in poverty, it's almost impossible to get out. It's very, very difficult. And I think it's not fair for us to actually to go around and tell these stories about how you just gotta pull yourself up by the bootstraps and come up with a good idea, or,
Yeah.
there's always some hope up. And I thought, these kids, they really struggle and they really fight and they're really smart, and it's almost impossible. And so I thought, because I had the short film, I thought there was an opportunity to try and tell something about that over time.
Now, one of the things about this, and forgive me if I'm saying this, I don't have a term for this, but this was a almost documentary because you did take real elements of these four kids. Well, they are no longer kids. They start off as children when this thing starts. And then you take the real story, and for lack of a better term, you put enhancements, or there's fictionalized events and stories of this. I'm very curious what made you come up with that idea, because the story itself is gripping. It is it is sad and it makes you pay attention to it. But what about the fictional elements that you added in? Why did that come about?
It came about, when I first tried to find the form of the short film when they were children. I had this experience, so the film is based, the method that I've done this longer film, and I also did the short film, was to interview the kids and then build material from the interviews. And in this case, write material and stage it. And when I was in that process, after I had done my interviews, when I came back to Denmark, it was tough listening to their lives, what they experienced and how it was. And when I came back to Denmark, I really wanted to share it with my friends and family just to process it. And I would tell people about this experience. And what I found was that people would, after I hadn't said so much, after I'd said a couple of things that maybe were hard to hear, they would say, "Oh my God, I feel so sorry. I feel so bad."
Right.
And then what they would do is switch the topic to something more comfortable. And I thought,
Yeah.
this is interesting, so we actually have a way of coping with other people's misery by displaying pity. And it felt very poignant to me that these kids did not need my friends and family's pity. It actually made no difference for them. And I also realized that in this system that we have of coping, the way we cope with misery, other people's misery, I thought there's a real hierarchy there. Like we are the ones who can feel pity for those others who could be pitied, right?
Right.
So I became very uncomfortable with that, and it became very important for me not to allow the audience to just sit and feel pity. And when you have children who are out working on the streets and who are poor and who are struggling, your immediate reaction will be pity because they're innocent and they're children. It's very hard for the audience not to feel that. So I wanted to find a way to present them in the film where it wasn't easy to just feel that, where you had to be confronted a little more by something else about them than just something that would evoke your pity.
You know what?
So
Oh, go ahead, please.
yeah. So that's why the film is built up of these it's almost like witnessing, like I
Right.
I I wanted them to make us witnesses rather than sort of create a sob story for us. I wanted us to witness it, like to really witness it. Actually, it's for people to have the experience that they avoided by telling me, "Oh, I feel so bad." I wanted them to take it in on a deeper level. And what I wanted them to take in was primarily their humanity. Because I do think that when we pity people in that process, we take a little bit of humanity away from them.
Right.
Because so if I walk by somebody who is lying on the street miserable, if I really stop and think about that they're human at the same way I am, it becomes very difficult. So I actually respect that you can't do that every day of your life. I think you would go mental,
Right.
you know,
Yeah.
you had, but in the film, I wanted people to really think a little more deeply about how they were human beings, just like their own, just like the own kids of the audience, or themselves, or I wanted to create some equality, and
Maybe
that's why I came up with the form.
maybe I'm a viewer and I don't see it because it worked in a way, because if, like how you said, that psychology of taking away their humanity or pity them, it was more, I like how you use the word confronting, because they were
Mm.
more in your face. They
Yeah.
understand where they are, what
Mhm.
they're doing, and they said, "Hey, we're gonna get through it." So there's this, I don't know if it's accidental, but glimmer of hope to
Mhm.
say, because for them to have all of this happen to them, they are, in a way, characteristically upbeat.
You think so?
In a way where it's just like, yeah, you're more than what I thought I was gonna get. Maybe that's their resilience. Maybe that's just them taking what they have to do on face value. Maybe it's just this. I mean, it could be something as simple as it is what it is. This is how I'm going to continue to live through life. Now, I guess when I looked at this, did you plan for this to be a 15-year project?
No, no. I made a short in 2008, and I really thought that was it. I was very happy. I was very proud of the short. I was very proud of what we did. The film had a great life. It won many awards, and I thought, bingo, bastard, done. you
Okay.
know, and so it was more, as time passed on. I mean, I just got very curious about their lives, and I could see, one guy was in Cologne. I was like, what is he doing in Cologne? I could sort of follow that some of them became more religious. And I was like, oh, that's really interesting. They're becoming very religious as they're growing up. So there were different things that were happening that that sparked my curiosity. And then it was this thought about, that there's a real opportunity to tell something about this predicament over a longer period of time, that you can't do very easily. Even if I set out to do a new film, it would be very hard to tell that story as well as I was able to do because I had the old footage,
So
because
you kept up with them. No, I'm good with that, and I like how you had the old footage. But how did you keep up in touch with them? Like social media or something?
yeah, social media. I mean, social media sort of grew during this period.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it was a little different with each one, because they're different people. One guy, Gasim, the guy who raps, he kept very much in touch. Every time I'd go to Kosovo, we'd have a coffee. He needed new teeth. He contacted me and said, "Can you help me with my teeth?" I did a fund campaign. We got new teeth so I was involved in his life to some extent.
Okay.
Um, and others were involved with some people from my crew in Kosovo. They would meet them. Pristina is not such a big city. So, they would meet them in cafes and sometimes my crew would help them out if they had some problems. So there were different connections, through different people. And then I would follow them on social media, and that's where my curiosity sort of started. So when I decided to do a longer film, the first thing I did is I got a little bit of funding to just go down and sort of properly meet everyone, talk to them about the old film, look at the old film again, talk about the experience, and then ask them if they were even interested in doing another film. They might have said, "Oh, that was a terrible day when we shot with you. I never want to do it again." Then I wouldn't have
Right.
done it up. But what happened was when I met with them, it was actually interesting because I think in their whole childhood, the event of meeting us stuck out like a very unusual thing compared to everything else. And they remembered things about the shoot that I had forgotten. It was very present in their minds because I thought they were children. Maybe they forgot that they made a
Uh,
film.
Probably
They
like
didn't.
it stuck with them more.
It stuck with them more. So it stuck with them a lot. And also, I think when I met them when they were adults, they were in a state, which it also they say in the film, like I don't talk to anybody about what happened. So what had happened had become taboo because everybody felt shame and they just wanted to put it behind them. In the family, they didn't want friends to know because they didn't want to be stigmatized. So so we came as somebody who they knew that we cared about it because we made a film about it. So, and they also knew that we had witnessed it. So we knew it. Like there was no, and we were comfortable talking about it as opposed to other people in their lives. So I think that created a real trust because there was this witnessing that we had done and we cared about it enough to go into it again, which I think has actually, I didn't set out with that kind of therapeutic process alongside the film, but I think it has had some healing power for them
Right.
to make the film. Especially, now that the film has come out, they came to Berlin and we showed it to huge cinemas with 500 people who came up and hugged them out. Just the whole experience of actually speaking it and
Right.
having it heard and recognized and people were touched by it, I think has been very important for them. And there's a lot of, I think one thing they have lacked in their lives is dignity. It's just to feel like they were dignified. And it's been very, they've been very celebrated by all the audiences because people are really touched by them. And when they step up on the stage after the film, people are like, wow, they get
Yeah.
it gets a wow effect because people are just impressed, and then they're standing there and they have learned to speak to the audience and engage, so it's been really great, that part, which I wasn't sure how it was going to go, but it's been fantastic actually.
Yeah, that was actually my next question because it's sort of like, how do you get those same group of four kids who you say are feeling all of these feelings, whether it be pity, shame, trauma. Let's just start there. Let's just start at trauma.
Yeah.
And you come back 15 years later and you're like, hey guys, want to run it back?
Yeah,
Um,
let's
yeah,
do it
I mean
again.
like, hey guys, but so yeah, that's a documentary in itself. So, but
Yeah, yeah,
when you talk about these, one of the things I'm very curious about, even though you did that and you want to talk about a little bit more how they deal with it in their adulthood, how do you introduce these fictional elements to these now adult children of war?
yeah. I mean, I think the fiction has always been part of the film, also in their minds. So when I approached them as children, especially because they were children, I only approached them to ask them if they wanted to act. And the reason I did that is because, and I even in when they were children, I mixed up the monologues so they would speak each other's words.
Oh,
And I very intentionally made the film a collective story and not an individual story. So I made sure not to reveal anything that they didn't really, like it was very, I wanted to create, you could call it like almost like a fiction shield that they could always go behind if they felt like it.
okay.
Yeah. And on purpose, because for me, the individual sort of personal revelation is not what the film is about. The
Right.
film is about the collective story and their state of being, which they share. So I even for the local audience, the guy who plays Gazim, the rapper's father,
Right.
is a very famous actor in Kosovo. And I did that on purpose. I know the guy, I did another film with him. And I said, please, would you come and be the father? And he said, yes. And I did that because I thought, okay, if Luan Yaha is in this film, then in Kosovo, when it plays, everybody will believe that it's storytelling
Right.
because he's in the sitcom. He's in the most famous sitcom was his whole life. So, and he makes people laugh. So I thought people would recognize him and say, okay, so if anybody wanted to say, why is it like this and this in your life? They could say, well, I'm performing in the film. It's not exactly like that. So they could always just retreat and not feel more exposed than they would choose to.
I love that in a way because, but it also goes back to my previous question when we talk about this thing called the fiction shield.
Yeah.
Because I see these actors I've seen in other projects, and we're talking about something like super heavy here. Does that in itself, this fiction shield gives you hope that it's going to turn around? Because the actors themselves can always hide behind it. Um, and the audience, they can, well, now that I know this, that's the thing that's like in a weird way rooting for these four kids where I'm just kind of like, yeah, man, you got dealt a bad hand, but you're persevering or you're rapping or you're working and you're trying to make it happen. So does it in itself that fiction shield gives you the hope that you didn't want? I
No,
hope I'm making that question
I mean, I think the fiction is very close to the reality. It's
right,
not new, it's not, I'm not telling a story that's not in the reality of
right.
their life. I'm just not individualizing it.
Does it help them themselves deal with those traumas and dark times?
I mean, I think I hesitate to answer on behalf of them because I think it's such a personal question.
Right.
But I think you know, I mean, I've talked to Shiva about it a bit. I think this process, in Kosovo, we won the audience award.
Right.
So if you're in a country where your whole life feel like everyone around you would look down on you if they really understood, right? Would you have something to be ashamed of. And then when you stand up and you talk about it in the film, and people then give you an award for doing that,
Yeah.
that I do believe that there's some healing in that, that you feel like, okay, I can actually talk about it and people can listen to it and they can respect me. I
Almost
think
like a make me cry award.
I don't know. I mean, but I think so. I think, I think there's some healing in that. And also, because I think, if you have a trauma that nobody wants to talk to you about and you try and hide, that thing grows inside of you,
Right.
and the film, I mean, I never set out to do a film that was going to be therapy, because I'm not a therapist. I wouldn't do that.
You're
But I do
unintentional therapist. Unintentional therapist.
unintentional, yeah, which is a tricky position. But I think the process of making the film, I think, has had some healing for them. I do believe that because I think it's created some dignity, which was a lack, and it's created some openness, which was also a lack before. But of
Right.
course they have a whole healing process, which is their own, which has nothing to do with the film as well.
Now, when you talk about the audience, like the film had its world premiere in Berlin. Now, you just passed the Danish National Cinema release. Now we're gearing up for New York City.
Yeah.
Since then, how is the audience, outside of giving these four brave individuals the biggest hugs they probably have gotten ever, how else have they responded to the film? Because I want to
I
hug them,
mean,
personally.
you want to hug them. Yeah.
I
Yeah. I think
do.
it's, yeah. Yeah. They deserve a hug. I mean, I'll tell them that you want to hug them. I
Okay.
mean, I think the audience, how do the audience, first of all, you never know what an audience really thinks. I mean, people are very, when people watch the film, they get very wrapped up in it because it has an intimacy, I think, with the characters, which you don't often have with films.
Right.
So, so what people have told me is that, after I watched it, I can't forget it, even though you might want to, which of course, as a filmmaker, I want to make things that people don't forget. But, I think people feel like it's very intense to watch it.
It can be.
And
Yeah.
yeah, and I understand that. And also because for me, knowing them and meeting them has been very intense, and it's partly transmitting that experience. It's something that we did together out of that experience. So I understand that. And I think people, when I've talked about to audiences about my thoughts about pity, which I'm not a big fan of, as you can probably hear, um, people go, yeah. And, I think people realize that maybe this pity stuff, we should try and shift on into something else, something more active or something, that has more compassion than pity.
Right. I can see that because once you pity, much like what you said earlier, once you pity a person, you strip them of their humanity in a way and make them an object. But if
Yeah.
you have compassion, you're sitting with them throughout this whole story.
Yeah.
And
And I want people, yeah.
I went the way of compassion
Mhm.
because hey, it was a tough watch. I'm just gonna be upfront with you. But
Yeah.
there was a level of I want to see how this ends. Not on some voyeuristic thing, but it was like I want to see how this ends because I'm like that's where that little kernel of hope kicks in. And it's like if this person isn't feeling it, I shouldn't either. If
Mhm.
this person has that pull you, I don't say the things like pull your bootstraps up and all that other good stuff. No, this person, for the most part, seems like they aren't phased by this
Mhm.
on the surface, I should say.
Mhm.
So let me flip that last question. What did you want the audience to take away from this film?
I mean, I want the world to be more compassionate, and I want us to find, first of all, I want all this war to stop. I
Yeah,
mean,
let's start there. That's a good start.
if we start there with a small wish, which is for all wars to stop, because I think, that's the other thing. I mean, I think, we're very willing to start and engage in wars, but we're not equally good at dealing with the aftermath. Like, we're really terrible at it, actually, because it's a huge job, and we don't. So I want people to start to think about the consequence of war in the hope that they will engage less or be against it more. Because I think, we don't think about, just how, it's generations that are marked by war. The devastation is immense, especially on a human level. And again, we don't take that in enough. We just don't take it in enough. And I want our conversation to take that more in, so I want more conversation about these long-term consequences of war. I don't want it to just be about the war itself. And I think we're guilty of talking about war as an event, a moment in time, but not actually talk about the afterwar.
Well, Birgitte, I know we're up against it. This just flew past, and especially tackling a subject such as afterwar, you deserve everything you get for this because this was intense. I felt feelings. I'm not kidding. I do want to give those four individuals a hug because they went through it, and I felt like I was there with them. I almost have to ask this obligatory. What's next on the horizon for you?
I'm actually, I'm using the same method that I used for this film, with interviews, that I'm writing fiction. And this time I'm doing something about my own family. So
Really?
yes, I'm working on a story in my father's family in the 50s.
Okay.
So I'm turning the method on myself, you could say.
Okay. Well, Birgit, I have to ask straight up. You're more than welcome to come back and talk about that whenever you want on this podcast.
Thank you.
Exactly how many boxes of tissues do I have to buy since we're turning it on you? Because now the compassion thing, I know you. We just sat down and talked. We now do I just go buy tissues now? How do I do this?
I don't know. That's your choice, I think.
Either way, you're more than welcome to come back on this podcast. We could chop up that story. We could talk about afterward. We talk about whatever you want to talk about. If you want, I'll be your unintentional therapist as you go through this film that you're making right now.
Thank you. I might need it.
All right. Birgit, it was a pleasure, and I thank you so much for joining our podcast, and you're welcome back anytime.
Thank you so much for talking to me. Thank you.
All right. Have a great one.
Yeah, you too.
Bye.